first thing Marcus noticed when he stepped off the transport onto the scorched surface of Varian 5 was the smell. Not the acrid smoke of battle or the ozone tang of laser fire, but something faintly like overcooked noodles and burnt circuits. A smell that suggested someone somewhere had tried to make a cafe in zero gravity and failed spectacularly. He pinched his nose and muttered, "Well, at least the war has a theme today." Kayla emerged from the shadows of the landing bay, her long ears twitching like twin radars scanning the horizon. She moved with a fluidity that was almost ridiculous, considering she carried a plasma rifle that could probably punch a hole through a small moon. Marcus had seen combat veterans, cyborgs with hydraulic arms, even alien mercenaries who looked like they had evolved entirely for war, but Kayla had a style all her own. She looked almost human if you ignored the ears, the slightly iridescent skin tone, and the way her eyes reflected light like a starship's nav system in stealth mode. "Don't tell me that smell is supposed to be morale-boosting," she said, tilting her head with a grin that made her ears flick backward in amusement. "Because if it is, your species has failed spectacularly." Marcus snorted, stepping over a coil of exposed wiring that someone, probably a very careless technician, had left like a booby trap. "I thought you'd like it. You know, exotic, authentic, basically Varian 5 cuisine." He waved vaguely at the landscape, metal debris, smoldering craters, and half-destroyed hover tanks. "It's got character." Kayla's laugh was soft but infectious, carrying over the windswept plains. "Character. It smells like a dumpster in low orbit. You humans are strange." He raised his hands in mock surrender. Strange, sure, but strangely effective. The humor was a thin shield against the tension that hummed beneath everything. Scouts reported enemy drones skimming the upper atmosphere, their metallic wings catching the dim sunlight as they scouted for weaknesses. Soldiers moved like ants in a hurry, running past consoles that flickered warnings in alien glyphs Marcus couldn't begin to decipher. He squinted at one display, then shook his head. "I swear, whoever designed this interface hated people with thumbs." Kayla crouched beside him, resting her rifle on her shoulder with a casual ease that annoyed him slightly. "You know," she said, "you humans really should consider evolutionary upgrades. Maybe retractable ears, less flappy, more aerodynamic. You'd thank me in battle." "I'll put that on my next wish list right after a personal starship that does laundry," Marcus shot back. "Priority 1. Her laugh echoed again, softer this time, like a warm chime amidst the chaos. They moved together through the encampment, weaving past soldiers calibrating weapons, engineers swearing at anti-gravity turrets, and holographic maps projecting the enemy fleet's position in eerie green light. Kayla pointed out various weak points with a flick of her hand, her long fingers tracing invisible lines in the air that Marcus had to admit were smarter than any tactical manual he'd ever read. "So, your plan is, what? Confuse them with fancy gestures?" he asked, leaning over a console that pinged angrily at him. "No," she said, ears twitching as she smiled, "the gestures are for morale. The plan is we punch them in their digital teeth and hope they taste defeat." Marcus laughed, shaking his head. "Digital teeth, right, I'll make sure to bring a floss kit just in case." By the time the sun, or whatever passed for a sun here, began to dip toward the horizon, the camp had transformed into a hive of nervous energy. Pilots checked their suits, artillery drones hummed like giant bees, and the soldiers' chatter ranged from tactical briefings to whispered superstitions about alien curses. Marcus found himself leaning against a scorched wall, trying to pretend that the imminent battle was just another Tuesday. Kayla sidled up next to him, tilting her head to catch the fading light. "You know," she said quietly, "if we survive this, you owe me a drink, something strong enough to make human bureaucracy seem poetic." Marcus smirked. "You're on, provided it doesn't taste like that landing bay cafe." She laughed, a small musical sound that seemed absurdly out of place in the ruinous landscape, and for a moment the tension thinned. Soldiers could die, starships could burn, entire fleets could vanish, but right now there was humor, shared in tiny, fleeting gestures. That mattered, even if the universe seemed determined to remind them of its cruelty. As night fell, the enemy fleet shimmered on the horizon, its silhouettes jagged against the dimming sky. Recon drones zipped overhead, scanning for heat signatures while the wind carried the faint electric tang of their energy weapons. Marcus checked his rifle, then glanced at Kayla. Her ears twitched in the pale light and her eyes reflected a mixture of amusement and calculation. "You nervous?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Always," she admitted, smirking. "But then again, I like my dinner rare and my battles unpredictable." He chuckled, shaking his head. "I think that qualifies as masochistic." "Maybe," she said, leaning closer. "Or maybe it's smart, you humans are too predictable. Predictable is boring, and boring gets you killed." A flare of humor flared in him despite the looming threat. "Noted, I'll work on being dangerously interesting then." They shared a glance, something unsaid passing between them, a quiet acknowledgement that the moments they had were precarious, precious, and utterly fleeting. Somewhere in the chaos, a supply droid tripped over its own legs and emitted a panicked series of beeps. Marcus snorted, "See, even machines are scared." Kayla laughed, resting a hand lightly on his shoulder as they watched the stars begin to pierce the darkening sky. "If we get through this," she murmured, "we'll have stories to tell, galactic legends. Maybe they'll even make a holodrama about us." "Sure," he said, smirking, "just make sure they get the jokes right." Nobody survives a poorly timed punchline. The enemy fleet drew closer, but Marcus felt for the first time that day a flicker of calm. Humor, human or alien, was a small weapon against fear. And standing beside Kayla with her long ears catching the faint wind and her mischievous grin, he realized that some moments, even in the shadow of war, were worth holding onto. The night deepened. Soldiers prepared, starships hummed, and somewhere high above, the first probes of the enemy fleet blinked into detection. Marcus adjusted his gloves, took a deep breath, and muttered, "Well, at least we have good company." Kayla flicked her ears, smirked, and replied, "The best soldier, the absolute best." And with that, they both knew the battle would come. But for now, they had laughter, banter, and the faint spark of something neither dared name, hovering like a tiny star against the dark expanse of war. Marcus woke to the faint hum of the orbital station's life support systems, a sound that could have been soothing if it weren't constantly accompanied by the occasional electrical spark or distant clang from some poor maintenance drone. He rubbed his eyes, muttering something about the absurdity of sleeping while floating slightly off the floor in a habitat where gravity had been politely reduced to a suggestion. Kayla was already awake, perched cross-legged on a console, her long ears twitching like antennae as she scanned the holographic display in front of her. "You're up late," Marcus said, blinking at her, though late was relative when the station's clocks had given up on time entirely. "Early," she corrected, tilting her head. "And besides, someone has to make sure the enemy doesn't think we're incompetent. That'd be a tactical disaster." She smirked, her fingers dancing over the projection to highlight enemy positions. "Which, for the record, we absolutely are not." "Uh-huh," Marcus said, sitting down and stretching. "Sure, let's call it tactical competence. You humans would have been proud." Kayla's laugh was low, teasing, the kind that made the tension of the previous day's preparations feel almost like a bad memory. "We're not humans," she said, ears flicking. "We're better, mostly." "Mostly," Marcus echoed, smirking. "And better apparently includes ears that have their own Wi-Fi signal." She glared at him playfully, then leaned closer to a console. "Laugh all you want, soldier, but if the comms go down, my ears pick up frequencies you wouldn't even dream of. I might save your life before breakfast." Marcus raised his hands in surrender. "I'll keep that in mind. Breakfast first, heroic second, priorities." They moved through the corridors together, the station's narrow walkways lit by flickering luminescent strips. Engineers muttered about recalibrating energy shields while droids clattered behind them, carrying crates of weapons that looked like they belonged in a museum of future violence. Marcus could feel the tension tightening around him like a pressure suit, but Kayla's presence made the corridors feel lighter somehow. "So, you ever miss it?" he asked suddenly. "Homeworld, I mean." Kayla tilted her head, considering. "Sometimes," she admitted. "Mostly when I want a proper cup of whatever humans drink to pretend their coffee is edible. But then I remember life's less predictable out here and predictable is boring. You humans have too much routine." Marcus laughed, the sound echoing slightly. "Routine keeps you alive." "Sure," she said, flicking a hand, "but it's boring as a starless night." They reached the armory, and Kayla pulled out a small device, which she waved at a set of weapons. The panels glowed briefly, and a selection of plasma rifles and energy grenades hovered into readiness. "Pick your poison," she said. "Or, in your case, something that won't blow off your own leg by accident." Marcus grinned. Always classy, Kayla, always classy. He picked up a rifle and tested the weight, noticing her smirk in the reflection. Judging by your expression, I take it you're imagining how many ways I'll mess this up. Not imagining, she said softly. Observing, it's part of the scientific method. He shook his head. You aliens are relentless. By mid-morning, they were aboard a recon shuttle, skimming the planet's surface in near silence, only the hum of the engines and the occasional chatter from mission control breaking through. Marcus was attempting to pilot the shuttle with precision, Kayla occasionally giving him pointers that sounded suspiciously like insults wrapped in advice. Left, she said sharply. Not leftish. We're not sightseeing. Leftish sounds more fun, he countered. Fun will get us vaporized, she said, not even trying to hide her amusement. Trust me, I've seen fun in zero gravity, it's messy. The shuttle descended into a canyon where enemy drones had been spotted, their sensors glinting in the weak sunlight. Kayla leaned forward, fingers brushing controls and inputting a series of commands that caused the drone's targeting systems to misfire spectacularly. Marcus couldn't help laughing at the display, which looked like an interstellar fireworks show gone wrong for someone else. You really do love chaos, don't you? He said. It keeps things interesting, she replied, ears twitching. And keeps you alive. When they landed, the two of them slipped through the shadowed ruins of an old alien outpost, moving with stealth that contrasted with their earlier banter. They ducked behind collapsed walls, Kayla pointing out traps and warning of sensors that blinked unseen in the rubble. Marcus, for his part, kept trying to imagine the conversations they'd have if this were a diplomatic meeting instead of a battlefield. You know, he whispered as they paused behind a fractured column, if we survive this, I'm writing a memoir. Really? She said, eyes sparkling. With what title? The Human Who Couldn't Stop Talking, or Years That Could Save a Galaxy? Both, Marcus said without hesitation. It'll be a bestseller. Kayla laughed, covering her mouth with one hand, the other brushing lightly against his arm. He caught the brief touch and felt a spark he wasn't quite ready to name. The moment passed quickly, a patrol drone whirred by and they melted into the shadows, whispering jokes under their breath while dodging detection. Hours passed in a blur of small victories, near misses, and whispered sarcasm. They paused at night under the faint glow of the station's artificial moon, breathing heavily and laughing at the absurdity of their day. Kayla leaned against a wall, brushing a strand of hair back, ears flicking as she studied Marcus. You're not so bad at this, she said softly, for a human. Thanks, he replied, smirking, and you're terrifyingly competent for an alien. They laughed quietly, and for a heartbeat, the universe seemed to pause. Marcus noticed how her eyes caught the artificial starlight, how her ears twitched with every small sound, how the faint curve of her lips hinted at unspoken thoughts. He leaned closer, almost imperceptibly, and Kayla didn't move away. Their eyes met, the humor of the day mingling with something warmer, more charged. Before either could say a word, Marcus tripped on a loose panel, swearing loudly, and Kayla stumbled into him, letting out an uncharacteristic laugh. Their faces were inches apart now, breaths mingling, and for a fleeting second, the chaos of the station and the distant hum of enemy engines faded. Marcus could feel the pull, the brief electric jolt of connection that made his heart thump against the confines of his armor. Kayla's ears twitched nervously, but she didn't pull away. Careful, she whispered, voice low and teasing. You might start a galactic incident just by falling into someone. I'll take that risk, he replied, grinning despite the tension, the absurdity of their situation giving way to a moment neither of them wanted to end. The night stretched around them, the distant stars glittering like a promise, and in that precarious stillness, Marcus realized that whatever the battle would bring, whatever horrors waited beyond the station's hull, they had this spark of humor, courage, and fleeting intimacy to carry them through. And somehow, against all odds, that felt enough. The battle began with a whisper and ended with a roar. Marcus felt the vibration of the ground under his boots before he even saw the first streaks of energy fire. Kayla was beside him, long ears pressed back in concentration, her plasma rifle humming like a living thing. Ready? She asked, smirking through the smoke and flickering light. Born ready, he replied, though the truth was that no one was ever truly ready for the chaos that descended on Varian 5. Energy beams carved arcs through the sky, starships weaving above like glittering predators, while on the ground soldiers shouted orders that no one could quite hear over the roar of combat. Marcus ducked behind a crumpled hover tank, trying to remember the evasive maneuvers Kayla had been teasing him about all morning. "You know," she said, leaning out to fire at a hovering drone, "if we survive this, I expect a medal for patience." "Your aim is uniquely human." "Uniquely human?" Marcus shouted, rolling behind cover. "I'll have you know this is deliberate, artistic interpretation." Kayla laughed, a sound that somehow cut through the chaos and gave him courage. "Artistic interpretation will get us vaporized." They moved in tandem, ducking and weaving through the wreckage, Marcus slowly finding his rhythm under her guidance. He had never realized how much trust could be embedded in a glance, a gesture, the way someone's long ears twitched as they calculated trajectories faster than any algorithm. She led, he followed, and together they disrupted the enemy's advance in small, chaotic bursts, Marcus shooting with cautious precision, Kayla dancing through the fray, her movements a blend of deadly grace and teasing irreverence. At one point, a rogue drone zipped past them and Marcus grabbed Kayla's arm to pull her back, only for her to smirk and flip over it, landing neatly on her feet. "You're holding me back," she called, ears flicking triumphantly. "I'm keeping you alive," he shot back, "priorities, remember." Minutes stretched like hours as they fought through waves of enemies. Marcus felt something changing within him. The humor, the banter, the teasing, all of it wasn't just to lighten the tension anymore. It had become their rhythm, a bond that sharpened his instincts, calmed his nerves, and gave him a clarity he had never known. Kayla's presence was no longer just distracting, she was his anchor and he hers. Then came the quiet moment, almost absurdly brief, as they slipped behind a ruined observation tower. The battle raged on around them, the sky streaked with energy and fire. Yet here, in this small pocket of fragile calm, Marcus realized how close they had become. Kayla turned to him, her eyes catching the fractured light, her ears twitching in ways he had begun to interpret instinctively. "Marcus," she said softly, voice barely carrying over the hum of distant engines. "Whatever happens next, I want you to remember this." He swallowed, trying not to let the gravity of her words sink him. "What, the part where I almost die every 5 minutes?" "Exactly," she replied with a teasing grin, leaning closer. Her fingers brushed his chest, and for a moment the world narrowed to the two of them. The air between them crackled not with weapons but with something far older and stranger. She pressed her lips to his in a fleeting kiss, a collision of warmth, courage, and defiance that left them both breathless. The kiss broke as the hull of the observation tower shuddered under a distant explosion. "Okay," Marcus said, grinning despite the pounding of his heart. "That was tactical." "Very tactical," Kayla agreed, flicking a strand of hair back. "But now we get to go punch them in the digital teeth." They emerged together, weapons ready, moving through the battlefield with a combination of practiced precision and improvisation. Marcus realized he no longer relied on luck alone. Kayla had taught him how to read the chaos, how to anticipate, how to act decisively without losing his wit. Every joke, every sarcastic remark had become a tool, a way to sharpen focus, a reminder that even amid destruction, life was worth the risk. Hours passed. Starships collided above, their fire lighting the smoky sky, while soldiers and aliens fought side by side. Marcus and Kayla disabled energy turrets, hacked drone swarms, and even managed to turn a captured enemy vehicle into an improvised distraction, laughing the whole time as alarms blared and the enemy scrambled to respond. At last, the enemy command center erupted in a controlled implosion, triggered by a mix of Kayla's alien tech and Marcus's human improvisation. The battle slowed, then ceased, leaving the field littered with wreckage but alive with the quiet murmur of survivors. Marcus sank to one knee, exhausted, and Kayla collapsed beside him, her long ears flicking as she scanned the horizon. "We did it," Marcus said, barely believing it. "We actually did it." Kayla laughed softly, nudging him with her shoulder. "Don't forget who saved your artistic interpretation from getting us vaporized." Right, he said, grinning. "Lead guide save me from myself, noted." They sat in silence for a long while, catching their breath and sharing small jokes about the absurdities of the day. Marcus realized he had changed. The fear that had once kept him rigid, the tendency to doubt his own instincts, those things had melted away in the crucible of battle and companionship. He had learned trust, courage, and the strange joy of laughing in the face of death. As the first rescue shuttles approached, Marcus and Kayla stood, surveying the battlefield. The stars above glimmered as